Hey folks, welcome to part two of the standing offhand series on the Daniel Defense Delta Pro 5 bolt action rifle. Last night I published part one, and really that was all about the IPA, the improved pick rail assembly that I was really kind of excited about. As I mentioned in the video last weekend, a week ago, whatever, a week and a half ago, we did a standing offhand as a company, did their first course up in Sholo, focusing on police sniper night vision use and infrared illuminator use. It was a very good class, and it brought to the forefront a lot of different questions and issues that police snipers are facing when it comes to using night vision and the adaptability of their rifles, their platforms, in order to run that night vision. This is something that night vision topic is something I'm very passionate about, and I won't go into all those reasons, because if I do that, this video is going to be all about that. So we'll just set that aside for the moment. I really want to focus on some of the other features of the rifle itself. Now, let me begin by saying that I am neither sponsored or paid or have any affiliation, professional affiliation with Daniel Defense Rifles. I'm using their bolt action rifle now. I do not own this. It wasn't given to me. It wasn't a gift or any form of compensation. It's just here for me to use in order to instruct with, and I've been doing that since roughly April of this year. So I've had a very extensive, longer look than your typical test and evaluation period that you might have getting a piece of gear. And I'm very thankful for that. I'm very grateful to Daniel Defense, and specifically their regional manager out here who lives in Phoenix, Chris Cooke. The guy has been instrumental in more things than I can really put a finger on, and more things than he is clearly aware of, because I don't know, the guy's heart is in the right place. He's a former Marine like myself, and we just hit it off real well. So we'll just leave that alone. But the rifle itself is not something that I own, and I am not beholden to Daniel Defense for any reason whatsoever. There's no contractual obligation or anything else. But I will say that in the amount of time that I've been able to use this full time, so since April of this year, in addition to the few looks and the minor experience that I've had with this particular rifle over the last maybe 8 or 10 months. Wait, we're already, yeah, so 10 to 12 months. I've come away impressed with it on a number of different levels for a number of different reasons. It seems to strike a really good balance between what you want, what you need and hope for, what it's capable of, and what it costs. There's a local department here in the Phoenix Valley area. I don't want to make any mistakes, so I'm not going to just take a stab at it. But I believe they just purchased a bunch of these rifles to be used as their on-duty sniper rifle, precision rifle. So, anyways, let's get into this a little bit deeper. I have a number of points that I want to go over. I've taken some notes so that I don't get confused, because as I get older, that happens more and more frequently. So I'll be referring to some of my notes here in front of me, in addition to some corrections specifically that I want to make about what I said regarding this rifle last night. There were a few things, for as familiar as I am on the user level, I am not a Daniel Defense catalog and don't have the spec sheet memorized. So some of these things were pointed out to me. Some of these things I kind of tripped upon and thought, why the hell did I say that? But I'm going to kind of clarify those things a little bit. To begin with, the Delta 5 Pro, in the configuration that you see now in front of you, is the LE military version. And by that, the biggest difference between the LE-MIL version and the, I guess, civilian version, the normal offering, it boils down to two things. First and foremost, it is the 16-inch barreled version of this, which is not available to the general public. It's not part of their catalog offering at this moment. When that may happen, again, like I said last night, we will have to. I will leave that to Daniel Defense to actually answer. But as of right now, the 16-inch barreled version is only available to military and law enforcement agencies for their purchase. And then in addition to that, the MIL LE version comes standard already with this full-length pick rail on top, the IPA. Okay. Beyond that, I don't believe that there are any other major differences when it comes to this version of the rifle versus another version. I will say that I'm hoping, I'm praying, I'm requesting that at some point Daniel Defense comes up with a foldable stock version of this exact rifle. More and more that is becoming the standard, the norm, and it increases our capabilities and our ability to perform the function that police snipers are asked to do. So having a folding stock, making it smaller, more packable, more concealable, certainly pays dividends in a pretty big way. So that's what I would like to see from them. There's some other nitpicky stuff, but I won't dive into that right now. So 16-inch barrel IPA comes standard on the Delta Pro 5 LEMIL version. The barrel. Let's talk about the barrel a little bit. So the barrel is a cold hammer forged barrel from Daniel Defense. They use whatever steel they use, but they've got a chrome lining inside the barrel, similar to like some of those AR barrels that used to shoot real well, or that you could install as an aftermarket product. It's a chrome lined hammer forged barrel. Now, for me, coming from the history that I come from when it comes to precision rifles or sniper rifles, either building them or being issued them or using them, I don't want to call it arrogant or bougie or whatever, but a hammer forged barrel has never ever been like my first choice. And probably as good as this rifle performs, if I had to build it to my own specifications, I'd probably ask for a cut rifle barrel or something along those lines rather than a hammer forged barrel. With that being said, however, this thing shoots pretty fucking good. Like so the limiting factor in any weapon system at this level, okay, regardless of the platform, at this level, the limiting factor is the human. It's the shooter, right? Generally, the rifle, the optic, the ammunition is going to outshoot the shooter for the most part. Some have a higher percentage of perfection than others, of course, and that boils down to a number of different things. But I don't know if I can outshoot this rifle. Like I haven't really put it to that kind of a test, and quite honestly, I'm not really interested in doing that. Like it's not. I don't need to make a statement to myself or anybody else regarding where are my limits and where are my boundaries, and then where are the limits and boundaries of this rifle. I'm actually more concerned about what are the limits and boundaries of the rifle, okay? Because this is kind of it becomes sort of a known quantity. It's sort of a hard data point when it comes to like the hardware, whereas we as humans ebb and flow from one day to the next, hour to hour, for a number of different reasons. So we're the unreliable integer in this entire equation. So at any rate, the barrel has been shooting super fucking good. Okay, I shoot the one that I'm using from Daniel Defense, as I mentioned yesterday, was the 308. This is a 308 caliber rifle. The one that my business partner Tyler is shooting is a 6.5 Creedmoor. Both of these guns are shooting equal groups at reasonable ranges. So by reasonable, I mean like 50 to 300 yards. Okay, really kind of the realm that police snipers live in. Regardless of what internet statistics may say, I think the 50 to 300 yard range is the most realistic for the vast majority, if not all, police sniper shootings. So, but with that in mind, I mean, if that is a fact, if I establish that as a benchmark, then this rifle, in addition to the 6.5 version, are both shooting lights out. Like I can't, I have not shot a rifle that shoots any better. Okay, it may shoot as good. This may shoot as good as my custom built, completely specced out Remington 700 that I have a love affair with. This may shoot as well. It's not going to shoot better than that, and vice versa. Like I don't think my gun. I don't know if my gun's going to shoot better than this. At least within reasonable shot strings. And I say that only because heat starts to become a factor when we're getting into the minutia of some of these rifles, how they're built, what the tolerances are and specifications. But I won't go down that rabbit hole. The trigger. So last night I mentioned that this is a Trigger Tech trigger, and that was incorrect. And I don't know why I made that assumption. I think maybe we've had that conversation. I've had that conversation with somebody in the recent past regarding some of these rifles and who's running what. And for whatever reason, I thought this was a Trigger Tech trigger. It is not a Trigger Tech trigger. It is in fact a Timney Hunter, which actually makes me even happier about the way this is done, because I have a soft spot in my heart for Timney triggers. Timney is right here in the Phoenix Valley. They've treated us very well on the team. I specifically went to their triggers when we replaced all of our jewel triggers out of the Remington 700s. That's a story in itself. But I specifically chose the Timney triggers. And I have been just super impressed with their quality and workmanship and consistency, not to mention their performance. The performance is on par with or surpasses anything else out there as far as I'm concerned. I really have no experience with a Trigger Tech trigger, even though I know lots of guys are saying up to this point and after I talk that those triggers are the cat's ass, and I don't know. I don't have the experience behind that, but I will say that a really well-tuned Remington trigger, an older Remington trigger, and a well-tuned Timney trigger, I honestly can't imagine that it would get better than those. Just like I said about the rifles, triggers may be equal across a certain line, but I don't know if one surpasses the other, and if they do, I think it winds up being a subjective personal preference kind of a thing. So anyway, Timney Hunter trigger, and it's been specced out by Daniel Defense specifically for this rifle. And when I asked what that meant, the explanation I was given was it's the hardening of the sear that they ask them to do on this on the triggers that go in these rifles for the durability factor over the lifespan of what they expect this barrel to last. So by doing that, it shows me at least, or says to me at least to some extent, that they're planning for the future. They're planning ahead. They know that this is like a wearable item, like a brake pad kind of. It's a horrible friggin' analogy, but you understand what I'm saying. Like every time you shoot it, you're activating the sear in the trigger and wearing the barrel and all those things. So these are wearable parts that they're apparently planning for or trying to account for as they sell these guns. Another thing, last night I mentioned this full-length Arca rail along the bottom of the forend. At the back of that forend where the receiver starts, in fact, directly underneath the recoil lug, you have this textured knurled surface on the front of the magazine well, which is actually designed to be a built-in barricade stop. Now, the addition of a barricade stop, while useful and has its place, to me kind of points to the roots of where this rifle actually came from, like its birthplace. So you have a barricade stop on the front of the mag well, have a full-length ARCA rail down here with a dead flat surface. And then I have this cutout on top of the forend, which I addressed last night, and I had my own assumptions about, but I'll get into that later. But those three features on this chassis kind of, to me, point towards a PRS competitive shooting style birthplace. Whether or not that's the truth, I don't know. I have not spoken with the engineers to ask them, hey, where did this come from? But it seems to be a reasonable thing to assume, because the only police or military sniper rifles that I've seen that feature these things have all come from the competitive shooting PRS world, which is entirely valid. Okay, so I have no issue with any one of these features being on a rifle like this, as long as they serve a functional purpose in the environment that I'm going to use it, or in the manner that I'm going to use it, which on duty as a duty weapon is not a competition. And maybe some of these things I would make minor changes to here and there in order to make it more applicable to how I use it, or to the environment that it's being used. But as this stands right now, I don't find that there is a downside to any one of these things, except for this cutout on top of the handguard, on top of the forend. Last night I mentioned that I wasn't privy to the design reasoning for placing this cutout here, 2/3 of the way up the top of the forend. I felt like it should be enclosed, that whatever benefits this may have regarding circumstances like better airflow, faster cooling, lighter weight, that kind of a thing, could be better used with a full-length rail that came that extended all the way to the front of the forend, much like the IPA solves. It has been brought to my attention, based on last night's video, that this cutout here quite possibly could be to provide extra space between the scope and the barrel itself, so that a larger objective scope can mount lower and closer to the line of bore, which is a principle, and it's always desirable to have that line of sight as close to the line of bore as possible. Given the understanding that you're giving up other things, or that mounting the scope that low may prevent you from doing other things. And I say that specifically because doing other things is exactly what we need this rail for to begin with, as a police rifle. And once again, last night when I mentioned, I think I went over like alignment issues between the clip-on night vision device up front and the mounting of the day scope. Well, just to reemphasize that, companies like L3 FLIR and Elbit and whoever else is out there that's manufacturing image intensifiers, night vision scopes for the front of rifles, like, they're not specially making the mount at whatever height you or I want it to be. They're just putting a mount on there, and the mount is what it is for that particular model, and that's the height at which it mounts. So as a tactical rifle, having this cutout for the purpose of running this day scope as close to the line of bore as possible makes no sense, and it actually works against us, because were this scope to be mounted lower and then clip-on night vision, they would make it would render the night vision useless, because the offset here would be so great that you're not catching hardly any of the image intensification coming out of that night vision. So the rifle scope needs to be mounted higher above the line of bore, just like I mentioned last night, if for no other reason than to accommodate night vision and make it as efficient and as capable as its design allows. So the better alignment you get between image intensification and day scope, the better resolution you have, the less distortion you have, and the clearer image it is that results back here at your eyeball. So so that addresses this thing, and I'm sure I'll have a conversation with Daniel Defense regarding this specific feature of this rifle, because as I mentioned last night, the mirage problem coming off the barrel directly in front of the scope here, combined with the mirage that is inevitable to come off of the suppressor or off the muzzle, combined with mirage between you and the target. That's a shit ton of fucking mirage, boy. So whatever, that'll, I'm sure this will work itself out, and it will become, it'll solve itself as a problem at some point. I think all of us remember, well, at least I do, those of you that are older than, 25 years old, 30 years old, you may remember the old school friggin' open barrel fiberglass stock rifles that had, like, literally had a clip-on, a hook-on band that went all the way across the top of the barrel, specifically designed to break up that mirage and channel it out around that band so that the mirage, the heat waves, were not rising directly in your line of sight. Who was that did that? Not Sig Sauer, or Tika. Anyway, I think it's one of those northern European countries. Seiko, I think it was. Seiko. I think they had that feature. Anyways, I'm sure we'll address this at a later date. Last night I also mentioned this is magazine fed. Now, one of the nice things about this being magazine fed is, besides the obvious, right? I can carry 2 5-round magazines, one with open air and one with Barricade rounds or barrier penetration rounds, and swap them out easily. Besides the obvious of that kind of thing, this mag well is flared and chamfered on the inside to make those reloads easier and more positive. Excuse me. And it accepts all 3 of the major manufacturers, magazine manufacturers. I can't remember the name of the 3rd one, but it's AI, it's Magpul, and it's something else. And I want to say AMS, but I'm not sure because I'm not familiar with that 3rd company. But regardless, for those of you that know already and who are already yelling at me right now what the name of this damn company is, this chassis accepts all 3 of those magazines. So you have no issue with that if you've already got the magazines. I think that's about it for this. A couple other features I wanted to mention. So if you look right back here, yeah, where my finger's pointing, you see this like little dowel that's sticking out. This little dowel is ambidextrous. It can be switched back side to side, but this is actually a thumb rest. Now, for those of us that kind of came into this whole profession shooting Remington 700s and fiberglass stocks, in particular the Macmillan stocks, they had a thumb shelf back here right behind the bolt. And that thumb shelf was important to me because the way that I have always gripped a rifle, whether it was a pistol grip like this or it was a more kind of a Monte Carlo stock or modified Monte Carlo stock similar to this that has this kind of a grip, like a hunting style rifle grip. I've never gripped it where I've held it like a baseball bat and wrapped my whole hand around it. I've always false gripped it and laid my thumb up here on top of the stock. So that thumb shelf to me made a difference because it was an important point in my mental checklist every time I got behind a rifle. You know, you're always thinking about body position, recoil management, breathing, eye relief, taking the parallax out of the scope, staring at the reticle, your trigger press, and then for me, I always used to tap my thumb on the thumb rest, on the thumb shelf of the rifle to ensure that I wasn't exerting downward pressure or pushing or pulling or gripping and torquing the gun. This thumb was just loose, and by tapping it, it meant that my thumb was disengaged from that rifle, and it wasn't part of my actual grip. So having this little thumb rest dowel above the grip on the Daniel Defense gun helps me do that, because even with a pistol grip like this, I still false grip it. Okay, so I still kind of C-clamp it and then lay that thumb on the thumb rest, and then I'll go through the same sequence. It allows me to utilize this style of a chassis, this style of a rifle, shoot this thing exactly the way I did my Macmillan A5, and I can tap that thumb and make sure I'm not exerting torque into the grip. So this little thumb rest, to me, such a small little thing, but it's kind of a big deal, especially for someone who's kind of got a routine and a mental checklist that I'm going through prior to actually pressing the trigger on the very first shot. So that's kind of a big deal to me. I mentioned yesterday also the bolt release on this rifle. So instead of the bolt release being up here inside the trigger guard, like you would normally have on a standard Timney or on a Jewel trigger or whatever else, the bolt release for this is machined into the receiver right here on the side of on the left side of the gun, and it's got a spring and it pivots, and then by depressing that, it unlocks the bolt and I can pull the bolt straight out. Now, not a bad idea. I like the position of that. I like the fact that it's not in the trigger guard. I like the fact that it's accessible right here. I know where it's at. I can keep an eye on it and whatever else. But, you know, last night I mentioned that this has its own downfalls, and here's what I was talking about. And this comes from personal experience. So back in 2004, maybe just getting into 2005, but I was in Iraq combat, a combat deployment to Iraq from September of 04 to April of 05, something like that. And I was the platoon sergeant for the Scout Sniper platoon for my unit. And I had guys, I had one, I'm not going to mention his name, and I don't think he's going to hate me for bringing this up because it's a good learning point. But I had one sniper in particular that came in from the field. Now, bear in mind, this is wintertime, okay, in Iraq. And it does rain and it does get cold and it is kind of a shithole in the wintertime as much as it is in the summertime when everybody bitches about the heat. This is one of the modifications on the Marine Corps rifles, and that damn thing was rusted shut. Like, yes, there's an advantage to this, but here's a big disadvantage. The tolerances are so tight. This is a very, it needs to be maintained and paid attention to, or that little cutout in there is going to corrode and it's going to rust it shut, and you're not going to be able to operate that without maybe banging on that in order to break the rust free. So that's the only, I just wanted to mention that as something to think about, because even here in AZ, you know, right now we're in the middle of monsoon season and it's been raining like cats and dogs for weeks and weeks and weeks, and thank God, because we absolutely need it. But the point is, corrosion happens even in the driest of climates. Phoenix, Arizona is pretty damn dry for the majority of the year, but once we hit this monsoon season, now you have to start, if you're not thinking about it, if you're not used to it, which it's easy not to when it's 115 degrees every day, if you're not thinking about it, you'll neglect things like this, and then bad shit will happen. So that's the only reason why I wanted to mention that. Next segment, I think we'll go into this scope a little bit. This is the Collis K318i. It's a pretty special piece of equipment, and I would like to dig a little deeper into that. But for the moment, that's part 2 of the Daniel Defense Delta Pro 5 LE version. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions or comments, please drop a comment down below, or even better yet, shoot me an email, jeff@deaddriftconsulting.com. That's also the website, and it's the IG page. Okay? Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys sticking with it, and I will talk to you again soon.